Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Nostalgia Bubble podcast, the show where two lifelong best friends celebrate the movies that they love. I'm one of your hosts, Shuggie, an amateur film reviewer, film fan, general nerd.
And I am Nye, Shug's pet monkey.
Is that this week's pet monkey?
That's this episode's, yeah.
I wish you were trained.
I think yeah, good luck. I think it's gonna be a general theme from episode to episode now.
Yeah. And this week, this episode's coming out in October.
Yep. So we decided to go with a sort of a horror theme in ode of Halloween.
The greatest holiday that there is. I love Halloween, and it's my pick first up for horror month. So I have picked the movie that kind of made me fall in love with horror films. Like, I'd seen a few before watching this. It's a pretty recent film. If you've seen the title, you'll know it's Hereditary. Don't know why I'm like building up anticipation. It's right there. But this is the film that made me realise just what horror films could be in my mind.
Yeah. I mean I've been into horror for quite a while. I remember loving zombie films and stuff, and you didn't want to watch them when we were younger. But yeah, I had some reservations about this one when I first saw it, when it was released in the cinema.
We had some arguments.
We did. Clearly not strong enough arguments for us to fall out. But I'm gonna lay it out on the table now. I enjoyed it more than I did the first time round, and I think you made the point that this is a film that you have to see more than once. And now, having seen it a second time, I would agree. I found it creepier than I did the first time round. I don't know why, because the first time I was in the cinema and the second time I was in my bedroom. I think, yes, I did enjoy it more. There are some things that I'm still not entirely convinced by, and I'm sure we'll get onto those. But generally speaking, I was entertained.
Really glad to hear you liked it more. Not as glad to hear that you've clearly got a haunted bedroom. But before we get into the film, I'll do a very small amount of pre-production on this one. This is Ari Aster's film debut. He is the writer and director, and honestly, that is mind-blowing to me that this is his first feature film.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a debut film at all.
No, he made like some shorts while he was studying, but this was, and some of them had got some attention, but this was his first feature film. He also, went out of his way to avoid calling it a horror film originally. He instead referred to it as a family tragedy that curdles into a nightmare, which I think is quite a good description.
Yeah, sounds accurate.
Yeah. He wanted to get Toni Collette on board in the lead role, and she was originally reluctant to work on a horror film, but she was won over by sort of his grounded approach to the genre. She said that he completely understood the dynamics of a family, and he understood what it is to be human and what it is to experience loss, and that's what drew her in and made her want to do this film. And I agree, like, for me there's so much more depth to this film than like your conventional horror. You look kind of, when we were growing up in the 2000s, horror was a lot of like, was all kind of the torture porn stuff, Saw and Hostel, and then as we kind of got into the 2010s, it was Conjuring and Paranormal Activity and stuff. And like, the Conjuring movies are well made, but to me there's just nothing there. They're boring.
Okay, I'm sure. I think we'll probably talk about that later on, because I have some parallels that I'd like to draw.
Okay.
Which, yeah, and these were kind of my original reservations. I thought that the film was at times slightly derivative, but I think, and it's interesting that you bring up The Conjuring, and yeah, we'll talk about that. What I will say though is that to have that kind of insight as a kind of debut feature film director, to the extent where you can kind of draw and capture the attention of a pretty prestigious cast, based on that insight and those qualities alone, I think is pretty impressive. It shows a kind of level of maturity as a director, which you wouldn't necessarily expect from a debut.
Yeah, completely. I also think just the kind of audacity with like some of the directorial tricks he pulls off. Like just from the opening shot, where it's kind of that pan round the workspaces and then into the room of one of the houses that goes into the Alex Wolff's character's room.
Mm.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
just what a scene transition. It's incredible, and it's like right from the beginning, he is like laying out a marker for me of like, I am insanely talented. Come look at what I can do.
Yeah, I think he's obviously a clever director, and it sounds like, and based on what you've also said about Toni Collette's kind of initial sort of instinct, it sounds like he's thought it through massively, and you can tell that it's kind of a smartly planned film.
Yeah, and I think he's come at it not from a point of view of I'm setting out to make this big horror movie. He come at it from a point of view of I'm making a film that's about loss and grief. We open with the funeral for Annie's mother, and the whole film is about how the various characters are dealing with grief until it becomes sort of this insane demonic nonsense. Which I love that hard switch in the sort of last third of the film. It's wild.
Yeah,
But
I think
before that, it's very much a sort of kind of personal film, and it has something to say, and that's what I really love about it.
yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that kind of hard switch into a demonic film, because the film is sort of littered with shocks all the way through, and I think that kind of it drops. It's almost like dropping a pebble every time, and then suddenly you just drop a boulder, and I think that's what is quite. It kind of foreshadows constantly, not necessarily certain events, but kind of it foreshadows almost the switch in genre.
Yeah, I mean, I think very much the first time you watch it, that kind of the ending comes at you, and you go, "Whoa, I wasn't expecting it to go to there." But I think when you rewatch it, you see all the little things that are setting up exactly what is happening. So that when you watch it the second time, you completely see, how he built into that story, how he built into this kind of big demonic twist that comes.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely second time round, I appreciated, obviously knowing how it ended. I appreciated the content that preceded it, and I spent less time kind of obviously trying to figure out what was going on, and more time noticing the conventions that were being used, the techniques, the kind of, I guess the use of cinematic. I don't really cinematic techniques, I guess, and the general direction of it. I guess just to reiterate, like it is one of those films that is, I think, best seen several times.
Yeah, I think you need to watch it at least twice. Once to just be hit, and hopefully you've watched it before you listen to this, because we've already kind of spoiled what comes, and we're definitely going to get into more spoilers. But when you watch it the second time, you definitely appreciate more. Like, so the first time you watch it, and I think this is like a good place to start, talk about the opening act. You're almost led to believe that the daughter Charlie, who acts very strangely throughout, that she's like the ominous force.
Yeah.
She's wandering around, cutting off bird heads and just generally acts very weirdly. There's the recurring clicking noise.
Yeah. The clicking noise is, for me, the thing that I found, or one of the things that I found slightly derivative, and slightly obvious, just because.
In what way?
I mean, so this is where there's a crossover, in my opinion, where there was a crossover with The Conjuring. So in The Conjuring, you've obviously got that, the game where they're walking blind and they're clapping, and they're using that as a kind of direction, a tool to kind of direct them to who the other person is playing. And it's just sorry, I'll start that word again. That repetitive use of the noise to kind of build that tension that has been used previously in the film. So you have that association to the character as well, and who is being used as to kind of channel this demonic force. And that's one thing that I found quite, yeah, I guess the word is derivative.
I think it's very different for me. I think it's not, it's a creepy kind of undercurrent to it, but I don't think it's there kind of doing what you said. I think it is more about, you see when you watch the whole film and you come back again at the end of the film when, spoilers, the demon King Payment has taken over Peter. He starts making the clicking noise. It's meant to be a sort of an indicator that she has some level of demonic possession going on with her.
From the outset.
Yeah. So it's meant to be kind of an indicator of what is happening in the story. So that when you get that moment where Peter he's fallen from the house and he gets up in the garden and he starts making the clicking noises, you understand that he is now at that point fully possessed by the King Payment.
Yeah, I appreciate that in terms of how it's kind of interlinked with the story itself. I think more as kind of like a convention of horror. I think that's the way that I saw it as being derivative. But
Okay.
I appreciate that it is used, its effect in the story is potentially used slightly differently.
Well, so my thing, I think in The Conjuring, the clapping noise is all about setting up the one jump scare that is really great, which is the one thing that I really remember about The Conjuring. I think all of the the clapping stuff is there to set up that one moment where she's looking down into, is it the basement, down the stairs, and then the hands come out behind her and clap.
Yeah, yeah.
Which that's like the one really really cool jump scare in the Conjuring movie for me, and it's the one thing I remember. So I think that's what that's all about. Whereas this is like coming at it from a completely different point of view, and I don't think like there's anything necessarily wrong with using a kind of just a recurring noise. Like that's fine. It's not something that for me is like a convention that you have to stay away from. It's not a convention that's overused in my mind.
No, not necessarily. I wouldn't disagree with that. And maybe it's because, I mean, I studied media studies at A level, and like I think a lot of that time when working with films, a lot of it was spent kind of analysing the structure of certain genres.
Yeah.
And so kind of recognising that like everything seems normal, and this is not necessarily the case with Hereditary specifically, but a general kind of structure is that everything starts off seeming normal. There's something slightly odd that happens, and then there's kind of a major event, and one of the characters will try and appeal or try to a kind of an authoritative figure, whether that is like the police or the government or something, which doesn't work, that fails. So they then go to look a kind of an alternative, which tends to be someone who's religious or someone cult based, somebody who's part of a cult, to get an explanation, and they're the people that, and then it kind of blows up from there, and then every now and then you get that twist at the end, which is like, is it over, is it not? And obviously that doesn't happen in Hereditary. Hereditary is one of those films where I liked a lot of what happened towards the end. I felt that it was potentially a little bit rushed, but maybe that's because the film was spent really building the tension, bubbling it up. You were piecing it together yourself, though you were encouraged to piece it together, and then you were presented with pretty much quite literally this sort of tapestry at the end. And what I did like was that I like those films where you kind of, and this happens predominantly in horror, where you kind of expect it all to get resolved, and then it just turns out that everybody's dead, and there are no survivors. And you kind of get that at the end of Hereditary, which I think is kind of quite anti-conventional.
Yeah, I
Which
don't even think it goes to everyone's dead. It's sort of this weird euphoric moment about this one of the seven kings of hell is finally come to Earth, and everyone. It's not even just like a really dark moment. It's this like happy, joyous moment, which is bizarre.
Well, it is bizarre, but I think it's been reflected throughout the film. I mean, there's this idea that like that whatever the kind of the explanation to all the goings on is, that's been celebrated by particular characters throughout the film. It's always been seen as like a celebratory thing. So even kind of when Annie goes to visit who's the woman?
The woman who talks about
the absolute nutcase. That she always talks about it as if it's a celebration. So it's not like it's been this dark force. It's just the way that it affects this family. That is, but all the way through, those kind of more sort of peripheral characters have celebrated it. So it's not necessarily that the ending is that, oh god, everyone's dead, but it's the idea that you get to the end and there are no survivors. It doesn't go back to normal.
Yeah.
There is a huge change, and it's going to stay that way, which I did like.
I think it's really interesting that essentially we're watching a film that, we think the main characters who we're following are this family, but in reality they are essentially just pawns in this, cult looking to bring about Payman's rise, because absolutely everything in this film is orchestrated by them, and even some of like the small details you might not notice. There's a great. This isn't me. Someone else found this. When Peter has the panic attack when they're smoking weed under the bleachers or whatever it is in America. One of his friends who's there with him is a cult member that appears in the treehouse at the end.
I didn't notice this.
No, it's so innocuous, but it's like deliberately built in. That these people are there shaping their lives at every single turn.
I'm going to have to go back and watch it again now, Shug. Thank you.
Well, did you see all the naked cult members at the end?
Yes.
But, like, all of them, because there are so many shots.
Well, probably not.
In the last sort of third of the movie, where there's just someone standing in the background completely naked.
Yeah. Well,
and you don't notice half of them.
Probably not, yeah. So,
there's a long shot on the house, and I never noticed this the first, 2 times I watched it. And it's just about 40 people standing around the house, absolutely starkers.
Is this, later on in the film? Or...
Yeah, later on in the film.
Shall this be my pick for the next episode, just so we have to rewatch it and then we can come back with new stuff that we've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm down to watch Hereditary again. A bit more gloom and depression for 2 hours, and then insanity for 40 minutes. I do love that about, that's something that I love some films do, is. And I guess this is the great thing about it being a film that you can go back and watch again, is finding new little nuances and little kind of details that have been dropped in and sort of peppered through that you don't notice sometimes until somebody tells you. Yeah. Because it's almost like you're going in and watching it for the first time again, and if somebody kind of explains to you that something else that there's been something in a film that you've not noticed, going in feeling stupid is great. Like going into a film being tricked and realizing you've been tricked is brilliant, and I can't argue that this film does that really well. And speaking of being tricked, I want to get back to Charlie. I think the funeral scene's so important because it establishes, she's acting weird. There's the little mention of her nut allergy, which obviously becomes very important.
Yes.
And you see the creepy guy when they're at the coffin, who is one of the cult members that we see later in the sort of house.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of setting up all of those aspects, because I think we have to talk about the Charlie moment.
The Charlie moment, yeah.
Where Peter is forced to take her to a party. She eats a cake with nuts in it.
Can I just say before we go any further that if my mum ever made me take my sister to a party when she was like 10, or not even that, like, I would be mortified. I mean, there was a point where I was convinced that this whole film pivoted like solely on the fact that Toni Collette was just a really embarrassing mother.
Yeah, I mean, she is, clearly.
Yeah. But yeah, so he takes Charlie to the party. Carry on, sorry.
It's just, yeah, it's such a weird thing to happen. But then, so she suffers this, anaphylactic shock, and as he's rushing her to the hospital, stoned out of his mind. She sticks her head out the window to try and get some air, and her head gets lopped off by a telegraph pole.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most shocking things I've ever seen in a film.
Do you know what it is? And so, a couple of things. This film it feels quite, it feels like it tries to be quite subtle with all of the details and building everything up. It builds up the plot. And then there are just these moments where it is just relentlessly gory and shocking. Another one was when Peter had his little moment in the classroom, where he starts
scene.
Which I think was absolutely just a shout out to Alex Wolff, was absolutely brilliantly acted.
I think Alex Wolff's phenomenal in this film.
Yeah, he's fantastic. I don't know how he didn't lose his hair kind of under the stress of playing this character.
Yeah.
And then also when you see, spoiler alert, Toni Collette decapitating herself.
Annie,
yeah.
that's
yeah.
My
and you just hear the thud.
My
after.
parents walked into the room at that point, and I think my mum promptly walked out. We came in to talk about something, and then nope.
Mum collapsed straight away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this film is it's such a good mixture of kind of tiny little details that you barely even pick up on, and then just getting slapped in the face with this raw kind of images, these raw images of just blood and screams, and it's so with Charlie getting pretty much clotheslined by a lamppost. The first time I saw this, I was in the cinema, and there was an audible gasp from everyone, including myself, because I think there's something really brutal and almost kind of inhumane about seeing something like that happen to a child. And
it's one of it's not like a hard and fast rule, but in horror films, children tend to survive more than adults.
yeah,
Let's be honest.
Yeah, and it's like a real blunt instrument. Quite literally, it's a blunt force trauma. But it feels like that. It's used as such. This time round, when I watched it again, I was with my housemate, and I knew what was coming.
Yeah.
And I just waited for his reaction.
Oh, I imagine it's great.
And he, kind of throughout the beginning of the film, he was like, "Oh, this is weird. This is all of this stuff is kind of a bit it made him feel a little bit uncomfortable." And I was just I sat there and I went, "Just you wait." And yeah, I mean, unsurprisingly, he nearly jumped off the sofa because he just didn't expect it. And I think this kind of there's a real, I mean, Ari Aster's found this real brilliant balance between playing with your head and keeping you guessing, and keeping you on the edge of your seat, and like almost like sucker punching you
Oh
like
no, it is a sucker
into your
punch.
seat. Like it's like he's kind of like bringing you forward and then just slaps you around the face.
Yeah, no, it is an
And
absolute sucker punch. You're just
yeah,
getting like comfortable. You think you know what's going on. You know there's something weird with Charlie. You think she's
yeah,
going to be like this big threat or something later,
yeah,
and then bam, she's dead.
yeah. And also you're cut, but it sort of like he kind of coaxes you to sit on the edge of your seat. He brings you forward and then like just absolutely hits you. And I think it's using that, and he does it time and time again, and you never see it coming. Every single time you're surprised, and I think to be able to do that to an audience consistently, more than like not just once, not just twice, but several times throughout a film, is a real skill. Like it's an art. And again, as a debut director, feature film director, I just think like there are people work on films for years and years and years and still don't get it like this.
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's unbelievable the talent he has for a first time
Yeah,
filmmaker.
yeah,
I want to say his decision. So you mentioned like all the gory stuff. His decision to actually not really show us the gore in this moment.
yes. So you
His
you kind of you see the silhouette, but the time you actually see it is in Annie's model. I think
yeah,
that's the first time that you kind of properly see the aftermath. And there's something for the way he does this, and I think we've spoken about this. I can't remember which episode it was in, but we spoke about the way that that I think it must have. I think it was about how a composer doesn't use music. It might have even been Jason actually, but not using music to create a certain atmosphere, and this is what Ari Aster does. So you kind of don't see, you know what's happened, you get the shock, but you don't get to see the aftermath. All you really see is you see the car stop, and you watch Peter.
So
kind
I
of,
think this is the thing. Is it focuses on Peter's reaction to it. So I
yeah,
mentioned that this film is about loss and grief, and here's this moment where Peter is at least in part responsible for Charlie's death,
yeah,
and we focus on his reaction to that, being part of that grief, his being part of that death, how that loss affects him, and his inability to look in the mirror.
yeah. Well, I think it's kind of reflective of his whole character arc throughout the film. There's kind of there's this indecision about him for the whole film. Like he's on the edge, he's on the verge, he's almost on the fence about everything for the whole film. He's trying not to believe things that he's seeing, and I think in that moment in the car he's trying not to see something that he believes, like that he knows. There's that kind of like he's constantly being pulled in two different directions, and I mean that moment where you just focus on him in the car is not only heartbreaking, but is also just kind of like incredibly tense.
Yeah, it's hugely tense. And then
Yeah,
when we kind of follow him all the way back to the house, we never see
he
what's in the
just-
car. We just
yeah.
see him walk into bed,
yeah.
and we
And
cut
then-
to the fade to the next morning and the
Oh.
guttural scream from Tony Collette.
Yeah, that is and that's what I mean by this is how Ari Aster like hides. He keeps things from the audience
Yeah.
in order to build and build and build, and you don't have to see. It was sorry, I just remembered it was Jurassic Park. The way that we don't get to see the dinosaur
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
T-Rex,
Of course.
and he builds and builds and builds, and you don't get to see it for a while. And in the end, it's not the image that shocks you; it's everything that happens around the image, and it's the use of the sound. It's the use of focus on the other areas of family life, like. And you're right that scream is just like blood curdling.
Oh,
And that for me was one of the most powerful moments in the film.
yeah, 100%. even knowing it was coming, it really hit me again this time.
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of, if you ask me, this was Toni Collette in her element,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
and you kind of like, I viscerally felt like a mother's love, like I just like, or a mum just kind of falling apart, and like it's something that you can't fathom ever experiencing,
yeah,
but that's kind of, I think for me in that moment, as far as kind of you can experience something through a film, that is kind of as close to it as I could probably get.
that makes sense.
Like, it kind of, it hits home. Like it really is like, it's it makes you shudder. And again, like that's just testament to Toni Collette, but also the directing
Yeah,
and the fact that you know that she's about to find it as well. It's not like you the scream doesn't take you by surprise because you know it's coming, and that's almost the worst thing about it, is that
yeah. It's you just
you're
waiting
sitting
for it.
there
You're
and
waiting
you're
for her to
just
find it.
anticipating, you're just anticipating this moment, and it doesn't let you down, in with lack of a better phrase.
And speaking of Toni Collette, I think we have to talk about the dinner scene later on, because this for me is the moment that Toni Collette basically should have walked up to the Academy Awards stage and been like, "This is give me an Oscar right now." The
Yeah,
dinner later on, the awkward, growing family tensions throughout. She's clearly grown sort of more distant from her husband, sleeping in the treehouse. Obviously, Peter's freaking out at school and stuff, and just the awkward silence at dinner that just leads into the massive argument between Peter and Annie.
yeah. This is this is the moment where you kind of see Peter start to sort of explode a little bit. You see him start to lose his, I don't want to say his cool because he's not staying cool, but you start to see the cracks really sort of initiate him falling apart.
Yeah.
And this is also the first time that you hear what he's got to say.
Yeah, it's the first time
Um,
he really vocalizes his thoughts on
yeah,
what is happening. He's been keeping it very repressed the whole time.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, this is, so Annie's character here. This is kind of where you start to see the erratic and kind of real up and down nature of her character.
So
So
I
this
think
is,
I think what we're seeing is what Peter has one very very common reaction to grief, which is repress the emotion, push it down.
yeah,
With Annie, we're seeing this like very emotional reaction to grief. It clearly affects her. It affects her state of mind, and it just she wants to do anything to have some connection with her daughter again.
yeah. No, I think that's a very good way of kind of um, painting that picture and like the difference between the two of them, and there's there kind of sits like a natural barrier between the two. I think that's a very realistic way of separating two family members.
Yeah,
The fact that you get people within families all the time that respond to different situations at completely opposite ends of the spectrum, and that can really build kind of wedges between and drive wedges between family members. And I think that, coupled with the fact that all of this, and I guess this is what Ariessa meant by it's a family tragedy, like it does depict the real dynamic of a family,
yeah,
and that kind of coupled with the outrageousness of what drives this story is what kind of leads it into the complete chaos. And because not only do you see this force gets stronger and stronger, but you really see this family get ripped apart. And um, and again, like in terms of the the way that there's kind of like these moments that kind of flash, um, and kind of throw this shock in your face, um, on top of this sort of simmering tension throughout the film. I think that you get this with Annie's character as well, because she's very much bubbling away at the surface. Like you're seeing her trying to piece things together, and she's almost like trying to keep everything together whilst working it out. And there are just these moments where it becomes too much, and at the dinner table is one of them. And I think when she feels like she's almost like running into a brick wall with Peter, and she then, and so all she can do is like run through it, and it just creates this kind of huge explosion of emotion for her character particularly, because that's kind of how she deals with things. But it's really in keeping with the style of the film itself. So you almost see, like, if I kind of picture it in my head, I almost see Annie's character as kind of like running parallel with the film.
Okay.
And like her kind of character arc and her particular story kind of runs alongside the film. It runs through the film. It sort of reflects the kind of ups and downs of the film for me. And I think, in a way, that sort of means that she kind of drives it as well.
Yeah, she's definitely driving force. I love that comparison of the way that just there's the simmering building tension, then explosion of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Much
But
like
it's not.
Great.
It's not like that simmering ever stops. So it's almost like that's what I mean by it kind of runs parallel. So you have that simmering, like it's kind of an undertone the whole way through, and there's just this like explosion dropped in the middle, but it's still simmering underneath, and it doesn't stop at all. It's just always there, and then it kind of all comes to a head, and it all kind of collides, and it all becomes like one big explanation, and that's it.
So there's an interesting kind of thing you mentioned there where this kind of leads into the chaos. I think I have an argument about this film where up until kind of this point there isn't that much in the film that is, specific to a horror film. Like, it could very much be played as a family drama if you just tweak a few directorial choices and definitely the music. Like, this could almost be like the climax, your sort of pivotal scene of a family drama. Like, if you look at something last year's Marriage Story, where it all built into this head and this massive argument between Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson's character, this would almost be that moment where the two are talking about, not accepting any responsibility for Charlie's death. And, they're finally airing these grievances that have built up over the last, hour of the film or whatever it's been.
Yeah.
And it's, instead of it actually coming to this sort of resolving these family issues, it instead, at this point, is where it morphs into something completely different because there's this cult manipulating things. But I think if you take up until this moment, this could almost just be a drama and not a horror film.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree, and I think that's what's so brilliant about the dinner table scene, particularly, is that you're kind of always sensing that there's something else going on, but you take it as a family drama for the most part, and again, this is why Ari Aster's nailed it. This is why he's done so well with it. Is that you don't lose that sense of it being a family drama, and you don't lose that sense of it being some sort of kind of like cult thriller horror thing, because something else is going on, even though you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And that kind of merging of more than one genre so well.
It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, massively. So I completely appreciate that point.
And that's sort of why, for me, Hereditary is like elevated so much as a horror film, because there is this extra level of depth to it. There is this sort of undercurrent of family drama, and it all goes horribly wrong for them, and the rest of the film isn't so much about that, but for up until this point, the first nearly 2 hours of the film, whatever, that's what it is, with all the creepy horror trappings that Ari Aster has added into it.
Yeah. I would just like to reiterate that this is why you have to see it more than once.
Yeah. I also think this scene, if I talk about Toni Collette needing an Oscar for it, it's been 2 years, I'm still going on about this. She makes the line, and all I get back is that effing face on your face, not sound like the worst piece of dialogue I've ever heard, and in fact to make it sound like a bit of genius dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, but something like that I think it obviously kind of shows you how good she is as an actor, because only a good actor can make bad dialogue good. It's a hard thing to do. If you get given a bad script, it's a hard thing to make it sound good. So hats off to her for that. It also interjects this tiny drop of comedy, which, in the middle of everything, because otherwise there is kind of no comedy in this film. In the middle of everything, to drop that just a little speck of like light, and again, it's realistic because it speaks to how people just don't. Sometimes, and especially when you're in a state of shock or high intensity kind of emotion, sometimes you don't think about what you're saying, or sometimes you can't muster words. And
it happens to me all the time when we're doing this. I'm sure you go back and listen. I lose the train of thought all the time. And
I mean, me more than you, I think. Editing this is such a struggle.
It definitely happens to me as well.
Yeah, and I mean...
But that's the thing.
You could argue that it means it's good writing.
It is good writing. I think it is. And I think it's hard. It's good writing that needs a great actor to, make it real. But because that's the thing you hit on, is it is real. But because it is, this fictional narrative we're telling, because we're watching something that isn't real, unless you're an incredible actor, it's going to be really hard to make that seem real in this really heightened film.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I think what we're going to talk about next is one of the big kind of contentious points we had when we originally saw this film, which is the, in my inverted commas, a seance.
Yeah.
You weren't a big fan of this when the first time we saw it?
I wasn't. And I think, like I've explained, I think there are points to it where it is a little bit derivative. I think so. There was no Ouija board in this film.
No.
But there were things that sort of echoed that the Ouija board. So I think
the chalkboard kind of stuff.
The chalkboard, although this time round, all I could see was Matilda. I don't know why. But yeah, it kind of channeling through what would otherwise be seen as something fairly innocent, I felt was a little bit obvious.
So my feelings on that the scene in Joan's apartment, the seance scene there, I'm putting inverted commas because it's not a seance. She's not communicating with any grandson. I think it has to be. It has to fit every cliche possible, because the whole purpose of this scene from the cult's point of view is to make Annie believe it.
Yeah, so it's misdirection.
Because they don't want her to do a seance to contact Charlie. They want her to do some kind of spell or ritual to allow payment to take over Peter, Alex Wolff. I'm going to get those confused more than once. I've been impressed not to do it so far. But, so they're trying to sell it to her. I mean, because they're pushing hard to try and make her take part in this some way. Joan is the way that ends up working, but there's the shot early on where the seance leaflet comes through the door.
Yeah.
They're trying to get her to take part in this in some way, and this is the one that works. They have to convince her it's real so that she will attempt it with Charlie.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to be honest and say I didn't realise that. So
Okay, that's fine.
I now do. I appreciate. I take that on board, and I now see that in a different way. So, um, I yeah. I think. I mean, again, this is why you got to see it more than once,
Yeah.
because there are so many ways to interpret these things. Um, there are other things. So the obviously when Alex wakes up and you see Charlie in the corner of,
Yeah.
or you
I
see
think
something in the corner behind him.
there are points later on in this film where you do get some questioning of whether stuff is real or not.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of always been happening.
Yeah.
There's always this sort of question of delusion hanging over the whole film.
Yeah, the
I
points
mean,
early on where Annie talks about, people in her family having, some mental health issues that lead them to see things. And I think when you watch it back, you go, how much is that a case? How much is that, them being manipulated by the cult as well?
yeah,
And it makes, a lot of the stuff you kind of see later. There are some points where it's like very obviously a dream sequence where she,
yeah,
sets herself on fire in front of them, and then it cuts to her standing with the matches about to do it
yeah,
in her, sleepwalking. But yeah, there are some stuff where it's like, how much of this is real? The one you mentioned where he sees Charlie, where she is hearing the Charlie's clicking noise in the
yeah.
car, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it does kind of keep you questioning as to what is fact and what is fiction. And ultimately, I think that's it works as well, because I mean, you think the film is going in one direction and then it goes in a whole different direction. Whether that's the actual story itself or whether it's the fact that you think it's a family drama and then it's not. So it is, I think it seems to me like the takeaway from it is that it seems to me like it's a film that is wholly designed to keep you guessing, or to kind of make you leave thinking, what
It's designed to keep
was
you guessing,
that?
but it's also designed in a way that if you pick up on absolutely everything, you can see exactly what is happening, which is
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah,
It's crazy that it
kind
does
of like
both.
working. It's working in like two different dimensions.
Yeah,
Yeah. And at the same time, still, it has those moments where it just shocks you time and time again.
Yeah.
So it's almost like trying to distract you with like figuring out what's going on, and then like bam, there's something big that happens, and then it
Yeah.
kind of does it again, and it like misdirects you and it leads you somewhere else, and then bam, there's something else that happens.
so
It twists and turns, and it's almost, it as a film, it feels kind of like walking through like a house of mirrors.
I love that as a description for it. Yes, that's amazing.
Yeah,
So then we get on to Annie attempts the seance at home. We don't see a lot of what happens because she says she's already done it when she wakes them up. And this for me is where I think the supernatural stuff starts in the film.
yeah. Well, this is when she buys in. I think by this point she's hooked. And
Well, she's already done it. She has already allowed payment to come in.
yeah,
and-
but I think this is kind of where she brings it into the home.
Yeah.
And so this is where you see it collide with family life and the family drama. So this is when you see the supernatural stuff happen. You see it happen when she's over at Jones's flat.
I'm still not sure whether that is supernatural stuff or if that is very convoluted fakes that they're pulling off. I'm not sure. There's clearly some level of supernatural power in the cult that they can pull it off, but I don't think it's like the main demon of the film doing stuff.
No, I think all of it is manipulation, and I think
Yeah,
that you kind of realise that at the end, that it's all manipulated. But what we perceive as being supernatural happens, like she sees that at the flat, and but that's not when you start believing it's a supernatural film. You start believing there's something supernatural about the film when it kind of dilutes the family drama aspect.
Oh, you start believing it way earlier, but I think this is where it like really comes in.
Yeah, this is where you feel the genre change.
Oh yeah, no, this is where the hard shift is, because then it goes into just full on, really creepy horror.
Well, and it's weird. Like it goes creepy, but also incredibly OTT, like massively. I mean, like when she sort of convinces Steve to throw the book in the fire.
Oh, it's awesome.
And
no, she doesn't convince him. He's refusing, and then she throws it. I don't remember exactly, but she's trying to convince him. And
she's trying to convince him, and he refuses.
She then it in.
She then says, "Oh, you're the love of my life," or whatever, and then she does it, and he burns alive anyway.
Yeah.
Which again, I reckon, is the manipulation going on. That's the whole thing.
You were meant to believe along with her that she will be the one who dies.
Yeah.
Because she thinks she has some link with the book, but it's not. It's all of this is about Peter.
Yeah. Which again is like it's just that misdirection that happens throughout the film.
Yeah.
But that moment, I think that moment is the first time since you see Charlie's death where you're kind of like not shocked, but you kind of think, okay, this is extreme. Like even the point where you see Peter in the classroom, it does feel shocking and it is extreme and it is a big moment. And I think it's quite a pivotal moment in Peter's narrative, in Peter's story. I'm trying not to use the word narrative because I said way too much. But it doesn't have that kind of...
it doesn't have the same impact as this moment.
Yeah, it almost... It still feels kind of within the realms of the film, and this moment where Steve is burnt alive feels like someone has kind of just let go of the reins.
Yeah, but then it gets pulled right back again because we get this really quiet scene where Peter wakes up.
Yeah, this is what I mean about the shocks that get thrown in.
But this for me is like the great scare in the film. Is we spend this like slow scene with Peter like gingerly waking up in the dark room, and it takes you about 20 seconds to notice that Annie is like crab walking in the corner of his room, like the top corner. It's such a good scene. I remember sitting in the cinema watching this, and I think I clocked it, maybe 10 seconds in, like before a couple of other people in there. And you could audibly hear, when everyone kind of saw it, because it was just like, oh my god, kind of,
just popping up around the cinema.
Yeah, I think it's the best scare, because it's not a jump scare, it's the slow realization.
Yeah.
And then when she moves out the room, the way it's just still silent as she does it.
Yeah, this idea that he's kind of... Again, it almost kind of feels like a dream sequence.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of questioning the reality of it, and the fact that he turns around and she's not there anymore, and like it just that silence that kind of stays throughout that whole scene, kind of makes you question actually if it is real or if it's just more manipulation. And yeah, that moment is brilliant. I noticed as she started moving, so I didn't notice pretty much until I saw the movement.
Wow, yeah.
And it caught my eye, so I then had to rewind it, because I think I noticed it when I saw the movement in the cinema, and then the second time round when I watched it, I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
And I had to rewind it just to watch it again. and point it out to my housemate who hadn't noticed it.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And that's why I
And
think
that's the
that's
great
such
thing.
an
That's
effective scare.
Yeah, well, that's also the great thing about, like it's such a big tool to use in the context of a horror film, and it has been used before. But the fact that there's no sound to it kind of means that it blends into that sea of those things that are in the background that that you notice if you watch it for the second or third time.
Yeah.
And those things that all add up, and it's that's something that's really interesting about that moment in particular, is that it's a really effective vice for horror, and it's a very definite moment, and it's something that could have been made a huge moment.
Yeah, well, that's for me. That's why it's so effective.
Yeah, because it's so downplayed by the fact that there is no noise, and by the fact that it's done so subtly, and that Aster kind of continues to keep it subtle.
So for
until Peter's downstairs.
For me, if this was, The Conjuring or whatever, there would be a jump scare in that room at that point.
I think this does happen in The Conjuring, and there is a jump scare.
Exactly. That's why this is so much better for me.
When there's the thing on top of the wardrobe.
Might be, yeah.
Yeah.
But so
yeah,
this is because there isn't a jump scare there. This for me, sitting in my front room, middle of the day, taking notes on my computer, I was still so tense watching this, and it will still leave, way more of an impact on me than pretty much any jump scare in any horror film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just builds to that tension, and it just ends up, and this is actually also quite close to the end. I didn't realise how close to the end of the film this was.
Yeah.
So I think this is the point where, like, you're starting to see it really build and build and build, and then it kind of goes berserk. And not in the sense that you're sort of overloaded. There are times where you're like, what is that? But you're not completely overloaded. You just kind of, again, going back to that sort of, the idea of this, like, tapestry. You're just kind of presented with this thing, and, like, again, Annie decapitating herself.
Yeah.
And I actually want to go back to that moment where she does that, because I think that's fantastically done.
Oh, that's gruesome.
But also, the fact that it then goes, there's this moment where obviously Annie decapitating herself reflects Charlie getting her head smacked off, but it uses that same technique where you just focus on Peter, because you hear the body drop, you hear the head roll, and he's just stood up in the garden, and it's just focusing on his face, and it just draws that parallel and between Charlie and Annie. And I think that's the moment where you realise the whole thing has been orchestrated. For me, that was where I was like, okay, this started way earlier than we thought. And like, again, another brilliant piece of directing. But also to kind of capture that at the real sort of peak of the film, at the like main event, to be able to still pull it back and take it back to a moment earlier on in the film and have that kind of just a few seconds of calm where you let things click and fall into place, but at the height of the film, I just think is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also, this whole sequence after Peter wakes up is where you go back and watch, and you'll see all the, like, cultists in backgrounds, and, like, some of them you're meant to see, and some of them, like, you don't unless you're looking for them.
Yeah.
It's great. Anyway, so, once Annie sort of decapitates herself, he's confronted by the cultist and jumps out the window. And this is where we kind of come into the finale, and suddenly, from all this craziness we've just had, it's this really serene, calm moment as he walks up towards the treehouse, and slowly, this kind of euphoric music
Yeah.
comes in, and
Yeah.
it's just
This is where the film really randomly kind of almost floats into being like a kind of independent film from like a blockbuster to an independent, and the kind of that clear difference, and like even things like the I talk about color palette a lot as well, but even things like the colors and the lighting,
well,
and
100%.
the
I think
set.
the color palette is so important here because it's been, a dark film for most of it, and then suddenly we
Yeah.
get these, warm, yellows and oranges, and it's bright and vibrant and upbeat.
Yeah, and I think again it's kind of adds to the celebration of this darkness, which is just uncomfortable. I think it's just the whole thing feels really uncomfortable, um, whilst also trying to invite you in and keep you feeling
Well, yeah,
cozy.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
if you watch this film from the point of view of Pyman's cult who just want to be rewarded, this is a happy film. They pull off
yeah,
a
yeah,
plan to perfection. This is
yeah,
like your Ocean's 11 heist movie where it's
yeah. They've
everything's
nailed
gone
this.
perfectly.
What has happened? Like Hereditary's become Ocean's 11. Willy Wonka's become Saw.
Uh,
Like,
I'm just gonna keep making these dumbass connections between films.
yeah, I mean, it's just it's a really interesting twist that happens on multiple levels,
Yeah.
in terms of story, in terms of character, in terms of composition and shots and editing, in terms of music. It's just like there's been this whole switch that's been flipped, and like suddenly a light has been turned on, and it's almost like this kind of, I guess, this illumination, like you or this kind of light at the end of the tunnel where the whole film is dark and then suddenly you're presented with this sort of grandeur, and and you're just left wondering what to think.
Yeah. And
And
that's
it
why you have to
really
go watch it
is.
again.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not really a film that you can draw a conclusion from, and I do think that this film is like, obviously you can figure out what's going on, but this film it's kind of um, like I know I said that you're kind of presented with a tapestry, and maybe I'm using that analogy because of the way that it changes so drastically in a visual sense.
Also, I love you kind of refer it to that, and then his follow-up film Midsummer. You open with a bunch of tapestries. There's a bunch of tapestries in it, and it kind of ends playing out the tapestries we saw in the film.
I'm yet to see Midsummer, so
I don't think it's
I'm
as
looking
good. I
forward to
don't
it.
think it's as good, but it has similar kind of beats. Like it ends in a similar weirdly euphoric way.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, it is an interesting choice, and I think it now. I mean, even talking this film through now, I feel like I want to watch it again because I
Hmm.
feel like I'm going with a new understanding of it. It's not, you don't even have to just watch it more than once. Like you also have to think about it and talk about it. And
Yeah.
it's a thinker.
I mean, we didn't even
Um,
get into like the weeds of Annie at the grief counselling sessions, or the grief group
Yeah.
sessions, where
Yeah.
she reveals all the stuff about her past, and it's very clear that her mother has tried to bring payment in with her brother and her father, and
Yeah.
because Annie was distanced from her, she couldn't do it with Peter, which is why there was the whole kind of stuff with Charlie, and that's why there had to be this long-winded way of, because Payman wants to be in a male body to
Yeah.
get to Peter through all this weird stuff.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so
I mean,
much depth to the story.
yeah. And what's really interesting is that because of the manipulation and the way that this cult kind of tries to do that through every aspect of their lives, you kind of, it's almost like it's happening at every point in the story. So it's happening when the kids are at school. It's happening when Annie's at counselling, and it's happening like it doesn't just happen in one particular context. Like sometimes you'll watch a horror film and like there's a certain room or there's a certain place that people are in, and that's where there's kind of the climax, or that's when, and there's usually like a safe place for these characters. There's usually somewhere they can go, or there's like I was saying earlier about how characters will kind of rely on like a higher power, or like a priest or something, and that for them is their safe place. There is no safe place here.
Yeah.
Because they're being so madly manipulated.
Yeah, like I said, the fact that his friend from school is part of the cult, stuff like that, it 100% ties in. And you get the feeling because you have that moment where they try and they put through the seance leaflet through the door, and they get her to do a seance via another method. You feel that if anything hadn't happened as it did in the film, they had backup plans on backup plans on backup plans to make sure it did.
Yeah, and it's weird because, like, realistically, if this were to happen in real life, you'd kind of expect that would be how it happens, right?
Yeah.
Like, there is no safe place, and this is, I think that's kind of, again, that's why that kind of crossover between it being sort of like a believable family drama and this kind of cult psychological thriller horror is so well done, because it's all about how it's interjected and how it's put into the context of this believable story and how it's made as believable as possible. And realistically, I think if there was a force like that at work, it wouldn't leave you alone if you're at school for the day. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's why it kind of there's sort of this kind of claustrophobia about it as well, and ultimately that kind of all leads up to this, like you said, this euphoric moment at the end of the film where it's sort of celebrated and you know what's happening, and it's weird because there's this strange sense of like, okay, nobody survives, like I said earlier, nobody's okay, but in a weird way, now everybody's safe.
Yeah. I think
even though you've got like Charlie and Annie's headless bodies kneeling on the floor,
yeah,
and Steve's been burnt alive in the house.
You know what? He doesn't get any. He's just left in the house. He's not important.
Yeah. But you still get this sense of like, okay, now everybody's safe.
Yeah.
And Peter's obviously been possessed, but
yeah,
it's like.
Well, I think Peter's been expelled
really
from the body. He's no longer in it. He's just gone.
He's not there anymore.
I think the inevitability of it all is, and it's something that the film actually draws, draws your attention to slightly, when you first see Peter in school, and there's the discussion in the class of the Oracle and how the characters never really have any choice in what they're doing, and that's very much mirrors what happens with the characters in Hereditary, because they're just caught in someone else's game and they don't have any real choice in the outcome of their lives, and it's all disguised again. This is all it's being spoken about, and that's not a new thing for horror. That goes back to slashers in the 80s and stuff, but the way that this is kind of all. You're drawn away from this with the whole stuff of where the bird hits the window and Charlie finds the bird, and you're more focused on Charlie and all of that. So you're missing the true purpose of that scene, which is this discussion about inevitability and how they don't have any control over the fate of their lives.
Yeah, I mean, how many times do you have to say it? You just have to see it more than once.
And
you're going to ask me what you're going to ask me what my final thoughts are, and I'm just going to say that again.
Well, what are your final thoughts, Nye?
Watch it more than once. If you've seen it already, and now you've listened to this podcast, now is the time to go and watch it again.
Yeah.
Because you'll go in not not only having seen it and being able to notice things of your own accord, but now hearing people talk about it, you can go in and you can see it from a whole different perspective. Honestly,
100%.
watch it. I've seen it twice now. I'm gonna watch it a third. Now that we've had this conversation, I am gonna go back and watch it, and I'll probably enjoy it even more. So yeah, go and see it more than once.
Lovely. I'll just quickly finish up with a little bit of post-production. It premiered at Sundance in sort of early 2018, and I remember the hype that was building from that first screening on Twitter. And when the trailer came out like a week later, it was just, my expectations were through the roof, and I still can't believe it destroyed every single one. Like, yeah, this just blew me away. It got fantastic reviews from the critics. The audience, was far less convinced. It got a D+ from opening night audiences, which is usually indicative of a film having terrible, second week performances and a big drop off. This performed amazingly. It's A24's highest grossing film ever. It still to this day. It beat out Lady Bird, which was obviously a fairly big hit because of award buzz. It shocked the fact that it overcame that kind of initial audience reaction to be such a massive hit is frankly amazing. And I went and saw it and was blown away. I went back and watched it again immediately. I've seen it
in true Shuggie style.
Yeah, I've seen it a few times now, and this film just it's a heavy film. It's not an easy one to watch. Obviously, the exploration of grief can be quite depressing. Particularly in the first, 2/3 of the film, watching the different way people react to the grief, and how they cope with it is, it's hard to watch. And then, the horror is really effectively done. I just think Ari Aster's a genius. I think Toni Collette should have won an Oscar. And yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Hereditary.
Yeah, well, I've certainly been brought round, I think.
Great to hear.
You've convinced me after probably about a year and a half of telling me how good it is, and me kind of going, I wasn't too convinced. I know. I think, watching it back,
the amount of times you've said to me, I will watch it again, and I'm glad I've made you do it for this podcast. No, I did say for about a year that I kind of accepted it was probably one I was going to have to watch again, and obviously you forcing my hand meant that I finally have, and now I've seen the error of my ways. Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Well,
this is what this podcast is about, right?
So this was my pick for Halloween, and it's your pick for Halloween next. So what have you got for me?
It is. I was toying with a few ideas because I've got, like you, there are films that I've seen more recently which have shaped my love of horror films,
so before,
certain types of horror films.
I think before you go in, I came in saying I wanted a sort of conventional horror film, and I think this is as close as I get with favourite horrors.
So
I'm feeling you might go something a bit less conventional, but we'll see.
Well, I was thinking of... I had a couple in mind, and I've decided that I'm going to go with one that really kicked off my love of horror.
Okay.
And I'm going to save the others for later on down the line.
Yeah.
But this one... So, we've mentioned this one before.
Ooh.
From one Toni Collette film to another.
Oh, okay. We are
We're doing this. So, I'm choosing The Sixth Sense.
This is another interesting one, because this is not a film that I'm a huge fan of.
Right, okay.
So we'll see if I'm won over and I see the error of my ways.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I mean, this is one that I watched probably at a younger age than I should have done.
Yeah, I remember you definitely liked this film when we were 7 or something.
Yeah. I'm sitting opposite my DVD shelves and I'm looking at it, and it's a 15, so I was definitely too young.
Yeah. I mean, it came out in 1999, so we'd have been 5.
God. I think I watched it a little bit after.
Yeah. Well, you obviously wouldn't have got
it. I definitely
into the
wasn't
cinema.
15. Yeah. Yeah, true. So this film is... Yeah, it's one that I've just kind of... It shaped my love of horror.
Yeah, 100%. No, I know it's a film you love.
It was my first experience of horror.
Yeah.
So this is why I've chosen this film.
I know.
So
I know it's a film.
I hope you enjoy it.
I know it's a film you love, and I knew it's a film we'd have to do at some point. And I
Yeah.
am excited to revisit it. It's been a long time. I am excited to see if I still don't like. I've always felt it lost something knowing that he's dead the whole time.
Okay, well now you've ruined it before you've even.
Everyone
aired the
knows.
episode.
It's like Darth Vader's Luke's dad. Everyone knows.
Yeah, I think, but maybe it's because I watched it so young.
Maybe.
But I
also know plenty of people
didn't
who
pick
are
up on the signs.
I know plenty of people who are on your side who love it still. So I'm interested to revisit.
Yeah, I think because I watched it when I was young. I didn't pick up on the signs that he was dead, and so
Signs. That's another M. Night
Signs.
Shyamalan film.
Oh God, that'll come up at some point, will it? Yeah, I didn't know. I think for me this is possibly one of the best ones he's done.
I'm excited to revisit.
Yeah, me too. I like this one. I have a bit of a sentimental attachment to it. So, yeah. Okay, I think that's it for now, right?
Yeah, you can find the podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube. You can find us at Nostalgia Bubble on Twitter or at Nostalgia Bubble Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to follow me, at Shuggie Says, all social media platforms. That's SHUGGIE Says. And Nye.
I'm on Twitter as Nye Reese, so NYEREES, and on Instagram as Reese Nye, so REESNYE.
Yeah, and we'll put all those links in the description below, and we'll see you next time.
Brilliant. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.